pleasure to introduce Dr. Hector Carcamo from Ag Canada just down the road. And I think first we're going to talk pea leaf weevil and then flea beetle. And I'm sure you're going to talk about every bug you can think of, right? So he just very passionate about insects, and so make sure you ask him as many questions as possible. So take it away, Hector.
Thank you very much. Again, it's always a pleasure to come out and have an excuse to get out of the office. Can you hear me? No, not quite. Oh. I'm going to speak louder then. Let's see how long I can talk like this. First thing I should do is I should apologize to Bob Lockshaw because I didn't hear his entire talk, because entomologists have a very short attention span. I saw a carabid beetle crawling in front of me, so I had to grab it. And I actually, do you all know what a carabid beetle is?
I just saw another one walk
Yeah.
by.
Yeah, carabid beetles are beneficial insects, and an easy way for you to remember these, I just saw this on Facebook, if you want to remember carabid beetle for some reason, is if you see a carabid, carabid it. Got it?
I thought it was crabby beetle. That was my wife.
You've been hearing to Donald Trump too long, maybe. Anyway, I haven't actually prepared anything in particular. Maybe one way to start this is to ask you, what have you been hearing about insects? Which insect has been the star of the spring so far? Flea beetles? Flea beetles? Which areas are you in? Flea beetles?
Everywhere.
Everywhere? Yeah. So are you seeing more of the striped flea beetle?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay, I guess we should postpone that conversation a little bit then, but it's good to hear that flea beetles are around. I guess I shouldn't say good to hear that. Entomologists apologize. So pea leaf weevil, this is an insect I also have heard a bit this spring, and I think the first call I got was from somebody around Fort McLeod who was considering plowing his field because it looked like this with peas. And the first thing I would say is, never plow your field even if it looks this bad. What proportion of the foliage would you estimate is taken in a plant like this? Ken, you're not paying attention, so I'll ask you. What percentage of the foliage is taken in a plant like this?
I think you should actually ask some people in there to rate it for you.
Oh, excellent. So 10, 20%?
Like Jenny right there. She knows pea leaf
Yeah.
weevil.
So usually, I'll give you the answer. Usually the pea leaf weevils, even if it's a very bad infestation by the adults, they take less than 20% of the foliage. And last year we actually had somebody, we had an adjuster, and he mentioned that unless you have more than 20% of the foliage damaged by hail, you actually do not even have the right to make a claim for that crop. So because it's well known that the plants can actually compensate and survive that kind of damage. Yeah. So the first message, I guess I could remind you, and I think I've seen all of you last year, so you should be the ones actually giving this talk, because I'm sure you know it by now. But the damage caused by the adults is very, very rarely an issue in terms of yield. And yes, the crop looks really bad, and I can totally understand that it doesn't quite look like peas anymore. It's not a new variety of peas that has the U-notch shapes. It's the pea leaf weevil that is causing the damage. The concern with the pea leaf weevil is the damage caused by the larva. And the larva, if you pull a pea plant around this time, or maybe a little bit later on, you will see these tiny white grubs that are C-shaped, and it's easy to confuse them with other insects because there are lots of other beetles. There's this dung beetle larva that also can look like that. But if you find them inside the pea nodule, for sure it's going to be the pea leaf weevil. So those little maggot-looking larvae, those are the ones that actually can cause the concern in terms of the damage, because they are very specialized, and they will only feed on two crops. It will be fava beans and field peas. So they're very, very picky about what they eat. And they will feed on the nodules, and they have the potential to eat 70-80% of the nodules, which could have an effect on nitrogen, on the soil fertility and the impact. Several years ago, we did a test with Scott Mears, and we compared several chemicals. And I can tell you that none of the foliar insecticides actually had an impact on protecting the yield in peas. we're now in the in year 2 of a fava bean study, because the pea leaf weevil just expanded its range and it's now into the Lacombe area. And actually, they have more pea leaf weevils than we have here. We have a test there with Neil Harker and our technician there, Patty Reed. She's devised a method to rate damage that no longer relies on counting notches, because they just have way too many notches on fava beans to count them. So they use a percentage scale similar to what we do with flea beetles. So the pea leaf weevil now has expanded its range. It's even as far as just north of Edmonton. They don't have it as bad in the Edmonton area, but in south central Alberta, they really have very high numbers. And there is a lot of interest now on fava beans in that area. And fava beans is also one of the crops that the pea leaf very much likes to eat. And I was going to ask our new PhD student that just started this last summer working with us, but she's actually working in across the road on another side, so you won't get a chance to hear from her. But what she's doing as part of this project is we are comparing management strategies similar to what we did with peas. So we have plots that have only the seed treatment, and the insecticide we use in that case is methoxam. We could have used the other one. That's the one that we happen to use. We're also doing the foliar insecticides, and after 1 year we don't see a big effect on the foliar insecticides either. So again, for fava beans, it looks like the seed treatment is the better way to go. And something that we often hear from growers is, why is there still damage on my peas even though I have used the seed treatment? Have you heard that? Have you? Yes. So we actually know from greenhouse and lab studies that the plants that have the seed treatment will still have some damage. So there's only about a 50% reduction in the level of foliage damage or protection. And the main reason that the insecticide works to protect the yield is that it has an effect on the egg laying of the adults. It actually doesn't kill very many adults. We know that it only kills about 30% of the adults. Some of them are just knocked out, similar to what happens with the wireworms, and then they come back and continue feeding. But we see a reduction in the number of eggs they laid, and there's also an effect on the larva, which is, I guess, important because the larva is the key stage that causes the damage. So that's why we see an effect on the seed treatment. Now, some growers have not used the seed treatment, and then they ask, okay, I see a lot of damage, like what we see here. Oh, I guess I should go that way. So what can they do in that situation? It's a tough situation, because we know that spraying the foliar insecticides, even though we have the thresholds, we know that if there is more than 30% of seedlings with damage, there is a potential for yield loss. And the only thing I can suggest, and this is an experimental treatment, would be to apply nitrogen to the soil. And I guess you have to then pray for rain and hope that it gets incorporated. In this case, the farmer by Formaclar actually was an irrigated field, so he had that luxury of actually applying the fertilizer. And because of that question, this year we actually have added a treatment to our fava bean plots, where we do have a treatment where we have taken the amount of money that you would invest into the seed treatment insecticide, and then we have bought fertilizer. So we're putting, I think, something like 50 kilograms of nitrogen, and we're adding that to the plots instead of the insecticide, and we'd like to see if that is going to be a potential management strategy. And it probably sounds not very smart to be adding nitrogen to a pulse crop when one of the reasons why you want to grow it is because of the nitrogen fixation by the bacteria, right? But if the pea leaf weevil is having such a major impact on the yield and it's mediated through the nitrogen relationship, then you don't have any other option. And I should mention that if you happen to be in an area where you've added compost and you have a very good level of nitrogen in the soil, you can just forget about the pea leaf weevil, because you will see this damage here. They will lay lots of eggs there, but the crop is not going to produce too many nodules, and the larvae will just starve because they will not find any food. And that might be a way to control the weevil in the future. I had this crazy idea that I would like to test in the future to see if you could actually have a trap crop of something like fava beans, and or I guess it could be also peas. Put fertilizer there in that border and see if the weevils actually would lay the eggs there, and especially if you planted something early, or if Ken had actually succeeded in getting us a winter wheat cultivar of peas. Ken, do we have one yet? Not yet. Okay. If you had actually winter peas, that would be an ideal crop in terms of managing the pea leaf weevil, because you would actually escape the insect in time. So that's kind of a quick overview of the pea leaf weevil.
Hector,
Yes.
so if you got a starter N on with your fertilizer on the peas, are you saying go back in at early flower with another, 15, 20 pounds of N?
I would probably say even put it all earlier
Okay.
to I guess promote. It sounds really silly. I guess you would have fewer nodules there to feed the weevil and allow the plant to actually take that nitrogen on.
Have you done any studies to increase the starter then to go
No,
higher?
that's something I want to apply for funding this year. We keep getting this question of because there's also the potential in the future that we may not have all these chemical tools to manage the weevil. So what do we do in that case? And that might be a kind of a bit of a desperate option of how to manage the
But I
pea
don't
leaf
think
weevil.
the chemicals are working anymore. We've put it on the seed, and then we go in and spray on top, and we still got lots of damage, right?
Yeah, and it can be easy to get into a bit of a vicious circle with insecticides also, and we've seen this happen in other areas. For example, in the States, they do a lot of spraying for licus bugs in strawberries, for example, where they spray several times a year. And then what happens is what Bob mentioned before with weeds: you develop resistance to the insecticides, and then you just keep getting to a treadmill.
So when you're doing your nitrogen application, are you not kind of defeating the purpose of bees for nitrogen?
Yeah, so the question I just got asked is, when you're putting your nitrogen application, aren't you defeating the I guess the raison d'être, why we actually plant peas, you know? And yes, it's a desperate measure. Basically, you want to protect your crop and have some yield.
But
So.
if you're going to grow for peas and not residual N, grow for peas,
No, that's right. Yeah.
put the N
Yeah.
down.
Yeah, and something I can share with you, this fava vintra that we did last year, we saw a very large yield effect, much more so than what we've seen in peas. And I guess there is something about fava beans that is different about peas. But we see two things. We see almost no damage on fava beans that have this seed treatment, which is not something we saw with peas. And we also saw a very consistent yield response that we didn't see consistently in peas also with the seed treatment. So what we've done this year is we actually planted a blanket crop of wheat on top of all the plots. And we'd like to see if there's an actual residual nitrogen effect of the pea leaf weevil treatments on the following crop, to see if I guess there's a balance of nitrogen that could be affecting the crop the following year. Any more questions about the pea leaf weevil? Oh. Okay, then should we move on to canola? Oh, I should just maybe quickly mention something that I always kind of preach about. We had a graduate student, 2007, and she had an interest in these carabid beetles. So she decided to look at what beetles actually feed on the eggs of pea leaf weevil. So she did a lab study, and she actually found that several of these beetles, not so much this big one that you see running around, but there's a very small carabid beetle called the Beedion that has kind of a pale spot on the back, and that one really liked to eat the eggs of the pea leaf weevil. And it's kind of important because how many eggs do you think that a pea leaf weevil can lay? Anybody has an idea?
10.
10?
Yeah.
Thousands, yeah. Somebody for some reason, I guess there must have been a graduate student that must have gotten into some trouble in Scandinavia because his supervisor made him or her count all the eggs that a pea leaf could lay, and they counted 3,000 eggs. So that's a lot of eggs. And then if you ask the question, well, if a pea leaf can lay so many eggs, why isn't the world run over by pea leaf weevils? And the answer is that you have all these natural enemies that actually are feeding on the eggs. And without these carabid beetles that are feeding on the eggs, we probably would have a lot bigger problem than we have now. which is, I guess, another reason to think about using foliar sprays. I guess there's really two very important reasons. Number one is they're not very consistent because you keep getting immigrations of pea leaf weevils, or they already have laid some eggs. And the other reason is you're probably going to be killing all these beneficial insects that are running around helping you to eat the eggs. That's my spiel for pea leaf weevils. We're good to move on.
How about alfalfa seed?
Oh, alfalfa seedling. Yes, actually, Neil Harker, our colleague in Lacombe, called me the other day saying, how do I control pea leaf weevils in alfalfa seedlings? Because they have an experiment, and I actually have heard this before also, that you try to establish alfalfa because you have these very tiny seedlings. In that case, yes, the pea leaf weevil could decimate the stand. And I think the only thing you would do there, and you didn't hear this from me, is you probably would have to spray several times. But you didn't hear me say that.
At this stage, though, what is our key bug in alfalfa seed fields at this stage?
So you are seeing a lot of damage?
Like, well, no, I'm just asking a general question. Lygus bugs or alfalfa weevils or...
Oh, okay, so what would be the key insect pest in alfalfa?
Yeah.
Normally at this time, we have been hearing a lot of questions about alfalfa weevil. And now that we have a severed entomologist, I think I have a little bit more room in my plate, and I've been thinking about playing with alfalfa weevil. The interesting thing about alfalfa weevil, I think that they have found populations just around Calgary that are resistant to insecticides.
They're in rosemary.
Rosemary, yes, that's I was trying to think rosemary and Brooks also. Yes, and I think Scott Mears actually has done some work in the lab looking at insecticides, and for some reason we seem to have resistant populations in Alberta, which is strange because I didn't think there was that much spraying, but maybe we didn't hear about it. And then at the Western Forum on Pest Management last year, every year in Western Canada we have this meeting where we get industry and entomologists, pathologists get together, and we talk about the most current, interesting and important issues. And this actually came up that alfalfa weevil throughout the prairies appears to be resistant to insecticides, and people are trying different kinds of insecticides without any success. So we are seeing this as a I guess an emerging priority.
I may have missed what you said. I have a seed alfalfa established crop or starting nurse crop this year, and there was a lot of feeding on it, and my agronomist said it was pea leaf weevil.
Yeah,
And then it's not, but its eggs won't actually affect the nodules on the alfalfa.
that's correct.
So the economic loss is probably negligible,
Well, depends how many you have. So if,
unless it shears it
yeah,
off entirely.
Yeah. Unless if you're only seeing a bit of notching that is obviously not killing the seedlings, then you shouldn't worry about it,
Yeah.
because they're not even going to lay the eggs there.
They
'Cause
won't.
they only lay the eggs on the field peas and fava beans. If they're totally forced, like if you have them in a closed container, they will lay the eggs there, but they will not lay as many eggs. You know, they're desperate, but then the larva will not feed on it because they don't like alfalfa nodules. But don't worry, there is another insect that will eat them. There is an alfalfa curculio, and there is a sweet clover weevil that is in the same group of these broad-nosed weevils. So we've got you covered.
Well, if there's isn't any more pea leaf weevil questions, I think we'll move over to the flea beetle site. Okay.
Okay, so now we're going to talk about flea beetles. Okay, this maybe not the right time to ask this question. I should have asked this question first, but the answer is going to be quite obvious to the question. Which insect pest in the prairies would you say is the #1 pest across the prairies in terms of use of insecticide, difficulty of management? Which one do you think it is? Striped flea beetle. Wow, you guys know your stock really well. I was only looking for flea beetles in general, but if you say, okay,
It used to be the other one, but it's changed.
okay, now that I'm going to up the ante and give me the Latin name for the striped flea beetle then. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. When people ask what is the #1 insect pest in the prairies, I usually say flea beetles, and in our region here, we probably don't think of flea beetles too much, at least south of Lethbridge, in the drier areas. We tend to have mostly the crucifer flea beetle. And once you get into the more humid areas, you start seeing more of the striped flea beetle. And there is a shift apparently happening where it used to be that the crucifer and the stripe were about the same in humid areas, say for example around Winnipeg. Now they're seeing almost 100% of the stripes becoming the dominant species. And this is kind of important for a couple of reasons. I guess from a just biological point of view, the striped flea beetle is an earlier species in terms of when it comes out of overwintering. So it will wake up early and it will be hungry and start feeding right away. About 15 years ago, we did a study across the province where we had a seed and date trial. We had a fall planted, early spring, and then a late spring planting of canola. And we were interested in flea beetles and their damage and the numbers. And it was a very interesting pattern. We saw that if you planted early in northern Alberta, you would actually have more damage. If you planted early in Lethbridge, you see less damage. And that we attributed that to the fact that this striped flea beetle was the dominant species there and we didn't have it here. Okay, a little bit of bad news for those of you who are farming around Claresholm and Nanton. 15 years ago we had 1 out of 1,000 flea beetles would have been the striped flea beetle. Last year I had a chance to see the data from the study we're doing, and it looks like now we have more like 10 to 15% are becoming the striped flea beetle. So 1015, not 50%. Sometimes my Spanish accent tricks me, and I say 15 and it sounds like 50. Anyway, 15% is now the striped flea beetle. Question?
We've actually helped this situation out because the Canola Council has been preaching to go earlier and earlier with canola, especially in winter. And two, they lack of nicotinoids, and so what do we give them? Nicotinoids. So we've actually helped them, I think, shift. And they're also out earlier, so they got little nicks and scars on where the other ones waiting around.
Yes, we should. Where's Claudette?
I'm right here.
We need a mitten and scarf for the Christmas edition of the flea beetle.
In charge of ordering swag.
Excellent, good stuff. Anyway, yes, you're absolutely right. The striped flea beetle is not affected by the neonicotinoid insecticides, and it's not a matter of developing resistance. It's just a matter that species of insects differ in their levels of vulnerability to insecticides. I told you about the pea leaf weevil, how the neonics do not really kill the adults, but they actually affect their egg laying. Wireworms are similar. They all go to sleep and then they wake up a couple of months later. Flea beetles, the crucifer flea beetle is killed. Actually, I don't know how it works, but it protects us from the crucifer flea beetle. Striped flea beetle doesn't die as much, so we have a major problem with this striped flea beetle. And a couple of days ago, I was talking to somebody called me from around Edmonton, and he was sounding very desperate, asking me. I have clients that have thousands of acres. First, he was describing complete decimation of canola in his by the striped flea beetle, and I thought he was talking about research plots, and he said, no, it's not a small research plot. Like you can see here, if you walk to the corner there, you will see that we don't have as many plants, and it happens very often in small plots. I haven't seen these with my own eyes in large fields, but I work in southern Alberta. But he said he was talking about thousands of acres in Edmonton that they are actually suffering a lot of damage, and they're having to spray too many times. So I think they have a major issue there. We don't have a solution right now for how to manage this striped flea beetle. There is a program at the University of Manitoba where they're actually working on gene silencing technology, which sounds very promising. This is something that they could hopefully spray on the crop. The flea beetles would eat it, and then it would give them a tummy ache, so they wouldn't eat any more of that, and then they would starve. It sounds pretty good. Very specific to the species or that group. It's not online yet. We don't have it available. So down the line, hopefully that will come on board. But for now, people are having to spray a lot of insecticides, and it's a bit unfortunate because they are going to potentially develop resistance to foliar insecticides, and you're also going to be getting into this vicious treadmill of killing the natural enemies and having to rely on insecticides, which but that's the situation there. So we are a little bit lucky here. So I like to be quoted by having some good news to you now that I can tell you we don't have too many striped flea beetles. I'm working very hard keeping them away from here, so hopefully I can manage that for a while. Anyway, so that's the case with the flea beetles. This trial here, the rationale for this trial, I think it has to do with the striped flea beetle. So the Canola Council has asked us, and the main study leader for this project is Dr. Alejandro Costamagna at the University of Manitoba. So we are attempting to validate the thresholds for flea beetles. The nominal threshold is what for flea beetles? What is the nominal threshold for flea beetles? The nominal threshold for flea beetles? 10%? Yeah, percent area leaf damage. 25, yeah, that's the nominal threshold that we use. And there was a study published out of Montana around the Conrad area last year, which took the threshold a little bit lower. They're going with 15%. We are doing this study to see whether the 25% is on the ball, and it's a very difficult study to do because we have treatments here and we have 5 reps, and we're hoping that some of the plots will have damage around 15%, 1.5, then 25% on average, 45%, and then we have treatments that have the standard seed treatment protection, and then some plots that have only the fungicide. And do you think yes?
Sorry to interrupt you. Is it the same threshold for both the striped and the crucifer?
That's a good question. The quick answer is that we actually do not have a scientific threshold for flea beetles. You know, we're going with kind of experience and observations, and the 25% is applied to both of them. Yeah, but we haven't actually looked at species differences, which is a really good point. So we have those treatments where we would like to have these categories of damage happen, you know, incrementally. I've been trying to get Ken to train the flea beetles to only feed on certain plots a certain amount, but so far he hasn't succeeded, and I'm not sure why. But anyway, in 3 years we only seen this happen once in our site across in Fairfield, and there we actually saw this increment, and we see that the 25% threshold seems to be correct. Here we got the flea beetles decimating the plots, all those 3 categories. They just happened so quickly that everything had more than 40% damage. So we cannot really have that comparison of the thresholds being a little bit lower. We are doing this study by planting early and planting late. And one really interesting pattern that I have seen now compared to 15 years ago, it seems that the flea beetles are actually damaging the crop that is planted earlier more so than the crop that is planted late. And I don't know whether this is because we have a few more striped flea beetles appearing, or is it because the crucifer flea beetle is adapting itself to what you're saying, that we're planting canola earlier, so we might be selecting for populations that are earlier in activity than those that are late.
Yeah, we did our studies. We would even see a strike later on. I don't know where they go, but they're out early, stay early, and then they're done.
The other thing about this striped flea beetle is that you're going to have more than one generation. The crucifer flea beetle only has one generation, and it's obligatory. So it doesn't matter if you move it to Southern California, you still only have one generation. But the striped flea beetle actually will have 4 generations in Florida, for example.
But it also depends whether they hit the cotyledon stage before there's a first leaf. The seriousness then is a lot more than if it has a first leaf, because they prefer the cotyledons.
Yeah. Oh, thanks for reminding me that. I keep forgetting these really crucial points. Whenever you talk about thresholds, you're talking about, say, the level of damage or the number of insects, but also the crop stage, which is key, right? You could see some damage happening on the true leaves, but I should remember your name. Claire. Just like Claire said, if you have that one true leaf already out, and if it's not having too much damage, you actually have a good chance of having a good crop, because the cotyledon is supposed to be the key vulnerable stage for flea beetles. Okay, what else can I tell you about flea beetles? You better ask me. We don't have natural enemies for flea beetles. One kind of pipe dream that people would have is there a biological control option like we have, for example, for cereal leaf beetle? You don't hear too many problems about the cereal leaf beetle, and that's because we are lucky to have a very tiny wasp that actually controls that pest really well. And people in Europe, where they no longer have access to these neonic seed treatments, they have been asking the biocontrol experts around the world, can somebody please find us a biocontrol agent for flea beetle so we can actually grow canola in Europe? And I've asked this question also to people with the Cavi Institute in Switzerland, and the unfortunate answer is we cannot control all insects with biocontrol. You know, we can all enhance natural biological control by protecting our crops or including say more permanent crops like alfalfa in a 3-year rotation. That probably would help you to have more beneficials there, and the following year when you have another crop you may have fewer pests. Yes?
What about bringing in hairy plants?
Well, you're up on the research really well. Dr. Julie Soroka and some other geneticists in Saskatoon have been working for a while on developing hairy canola, and I believe they have made some progress. The only challenge that I see there is that it is expressed on the true leaves and not on the cotyledons. I think they're working on that. Yes, they can show that these hairy canolas, the hairs are on the true leaves. They will actually deter flea beetle feeding, of course. Who would like to be prickled by hairs, you know, when it's trying to eat? Nobody. And the flea beetles are the same. So there's less feeding by the flea beetles on these hairy canolas, but it's not on the cotyledons yet. And I think that's where they probably could work a bit more on.
Is there a preferred overwintering site for flea beetles?
Yes, similar to the Cave seaport weevil, they would overwinter in tree shelters or also on the field margins wherever there is enough residue to hide. They don't overwinter in the actual field.
Hey Hector, you're going to start studying mouse control in canola?
Mouse control.
Literally, we have mice eating our canola.
You know, the provincial entomologist in Saskatchewan, he has it in his title. He's the vertebrate and invertebrate pest control expert for the province. Luckily, I don't have that title. Any questions about flea beetles? No? Time to move on?
Okay, thanks Hector.